welcome to the 15th episode of Weedy and House. This is Theo Henderson, and the title of this episode is Ordinary Women Doing Extraordinary Things.
Because at the time when I was in the facility, I would just be inside most of the day and be part of a group work that really helped me in my rehabilitation process. But it was in the moments where they, for example, brought me to the park or get some ice cream that I was reminded that I can have my life again in terms of integrating back and still enjoying. What does it mean to still feel joy?
I've been on quite a few waiting lists. I thought that because I have cerebral palsy, which is a distinctive disability, I thought I might be at the top of some list, but unfortunately not. So I've encountered a lot of situations having to do with homeless and the Union Rescue Mission, which is the one shelter that everybody is sent to. I didn't know that it was going to be so hard. I actually saved up about $3,500, and they said that they can do absolutely nothing for me. So they referred me to another shelter.
In the midst of preparing for this episode, I incurred an injury. I was out and running around doing different interviews, and then I was alerted that someone was trying to take my belongings. I rushed in a dash to make sure that doesn't happen because things are going to be very difficult to replace during this coronavirus scare. And as I was doing this, I rolled my ankle crossing the street. The pain was unbearable. I'm able to be mobile, but my ankle is swollen, and it brought about some questions. If I was housed, the first thing would have been I would have probably limped painfully to my home, got me some ice, and elevated my ankle. That did not happen. I had to painfully walk to the park, collapse on the chair, and beg for the kindness of someone to go to their house to get a ice pack. But there's other looming things. Should I get medical attention? And right now I'm deciding no. Reason one, of course, is because I'm unhoused, and secondly, the coronavirus has been spread by housed people. So I definitely don't want to be even in a vulnerable state compromised by housed people and their virus or potential to get one. So I have to be able to heal on my own wit and my own self-care until I'm able at a position to take care of myself. This episode also talks about, because of the coronavirus, there has been some demands by Services Not Sweeps, Street Watch, LA Can, and the Coalition and Koreatown for All. And we've all came together to demand certain things. And our demand list for coronavirus 19 for unhoused Angelenos and demands to the city and county of Los Angeles starts with this. Stop with the daytime tents down enforcement. Stop towing RVs and other vehicles that people are seeking shelter. That's a particular emphasis on Chatsworth. They are targeting and terrorizing unhoused families with children and telling them that they're going to tow their truck and separate their kids. Sergeant Moreno and Schneider are the major culprits of that. Stop all sweeps like Care Plus that displace people and lead to the loss of critical life savings. There are places that are called enforcement zones in different places here. And the coronavirus that has been in the news, the LAX police officer has the coronavirus. So they are potential carriers doing these sweeps and pushing people away with their infections. Number 4, stop evictions and implement immediate rent freeze and eviction freeze. There's nothing to be had. You can't force people to be evicted when their jobs are slowing and things are being shut down, and to penalize them for not paying the rent because our economy and our system has shut down through a pandemic is cruel, illegal, and wrong. Number 5, supply dumpsters, showers, hand washing sections, porta potties, vermin abatement, soap, water to every unhoused settlement in Los Angeles, California. Thanks to the NIMBY movement that has basically, as well as the co-opting of the police officers, painting the picture that all unhoused people are mentally ill and drug addicts, many unhoused settlements are in hiding because they are tired of being harassed. So that is a gargantuan tax, which brings about the shutting down of libraries and public parks where they should have bathrooms. They cannot. Number 6, immediately implement 24 hours, 7 days a week restroom access in parks, benches, and government properties. In the parks in Chinatown, there are no bathrooms. They're shutting it down. Basically, there are no public bathrooms in Chinatown thanks to the NIMBY movement, thanks to Business Improvement District enforcement of George Yu telling people not to allow bathrooms and force people not to use the bathroom for unhoused people. So there's nowhere for them to go. Provide space that those who do not have a permanent home can have access to, including private and public buildings, to slow and stop the spread. Oppose any plan under the guise of public health to warehouse unhoused people in tent structures to camps that result of people living on top of one another. One more thing, I have my own demand. Starbucks in Chinatown, Little Tokyo, and in the downtown proper has been in concert with Business Improvement District to remove phone chargers to penalize and discourage unhoused people to coming in the store. If you go into the stores, you can see the architecture structure that is not inviting anymore. You're having to stand. That's also a very handicap for unhoused people that are having handicaps, physical, visible, and invisible. The message is clear in the idea that they are trying to be hostile thanks to the Bloomberg article of saying that customer input has gone down due to they don't want to be interacting with unhoused people. Number 9, release incarcerated Angelenos, vulnerable people facing misdemeanors and quality of life sentences that our city attorney who's running for mayor and Mayor of Garcetti, as well as City Council President Nuri Martinez and Mitchell Farrow and other of those ilk have been pushing for. So release incarcerated Angelenos. Vulnerable people facing misdemeanor and quality of life sentences should be released. And lastly, number 10, the city and county must utilize their outreach capacity. That doesn't include police officers. That definitely doesn't include Department of Sanitation. If we have sanitation, they have different drop-off points, just like where we can have hand washing sanitation spots where they can supply garbage bags and places where unhoused people can drop off, and the contact with anti-unhoused sanitation workers are minimized or in fact eliminated. History has recorded many atrocious acts. With readers of history after the fact, we had a distance and we had a sense of detachment to comfortably say that we had no hand in it, even though many times that we benefit from it. But this is one crime of human nature that we cannot ignore. The criminalization of the unhoused, the indifference, and the harmful ordinances that has been enacted has come back to haunt us. The closing of the libraries where unhoused people use sanitary stations, cleaning themselves up, charging their phones, because hostile businesses have adopted hostile architecture and harsh policies to penalize unhoused people from carrying their belongings and being part of the community based on fears, distrust, and lack of understanding and compassion has led us as a society to really not care as we should. But history has a funny way of repeating itself and has a way of our descendants going back and looking at how cruel and how unjust we were. What will we be able to say and how will we be able to justify these behaviors? That the majority of unhoused people are mentally ill and drug addicts? They're not going to accept that. That they were less than and we were concerned about property values? They are not going to accept that. That the external was more important than the internal. The structures that we have in our systems that could have been dismantled or expanded upon that we chose cowardly not to act. That our civic leaders folded and allowed a bunch of hateful people to push their initiative through to lobbying efforts or to the most hateful ideas of actions of vigilantism, and they remained silent. We the unhoused is a very integral part right now in history, because this is going to be 20 to 30 years from now. People will research what did we do during a pandemic. And I will be doing my best at this podcast to highlight just the damage that has been caused. But hopefully change could come a lot sooner, but hopefully in the future it won't. Women's History Month creates an opportunity for all of us to learn about the accomplishments and the struggles of ordinary women doing extraordinary things. And this is an apt description of the coming guest. Her name is Cindy Justice, and she has explained to us in our promo as well as on our interview of the challenges that she faced trying to do the right thing in an extraordinary circumstance, as well as how difficult it is to try to stay optimistic for the housing. Let's listen in to Cindy's story. This is Theo Henderson from Whitney Unhoused, and I welcome you again for our 15th episode of Whitney Unhoused. March is Women's History Month, and I'm highlighting the stories of women that have been going through extraordinary circumstances. Sometimes ordinary people are faced with extraordinary circumstances, and we deal with it in a unique way. We are aware of the coronavirus as well, but I also want to highlight the challenges more than just the coronavirus. And with that said, I want to introduce our new guest, Cindy, and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself. Hello, Cindy.
Hi, how are you out today? I'd like to say that my name is Cindy, and I am unhoused.
Okay, so tell us how you became unhoused.
I became unhoused because I was coming to California from a domestic violence situation, and I got here and actually discovered that being homeless, I was in a slight better situation because where I came from, their homeless shelters were not quite as nice as these homeless shelters. And then too, I was going from couch to couch there, from my friend's house to another friend's house to another friend's house. And coming here, it was a little bit easier, and I was able to get into many shelters.
Okay, so the question is, you've been going to many shelters, but why haven't you gotten housing?
That has been a long process of story. I've been on quite a few waiting lists. I thought that because I have cerebral palsy, which is a distinctive disability, I thought I might be at the top of some list, but unfortunately not. So I've encountered a lot of situations having to do with homeless and the Union Rescue Mission, which is the one shelter that everybody is sent to. I didn't know that it was going to be so hard. I actually saved up about $3,500, and they said that they can do absolutely nothing for me. So they referred me to another shelter with another program.
So this is for the answers for the audience that are always saying that people that want to go to shelters. She's been going to shelter after shelter, and many unhoused people really don't want shelters. I don't want shelter. I want to be housed. So is that what your experience is? Because after all these shelters, I would have expected that you would want it to be placed somewhere a little more stable.
Of course, yeah. It's that's been the undaunting part of being homeless. You go from shelter to shelter and from program to program, and you're saying, okay, when is this going to end? And so how can I make it end, which has been the complicated answer I see,
How long have you been unhoused?
I have been unhoused for the whole 2 years that I have been here.
That's sad. So tell us a little bit about your experiences at these shelters. Is it true that they have curfews and have strict rules, or is it easy peasy?
It's true that they have curfews. They have all kind of rules. Let me stop you there. Is it the same kind of rules when people have at houses that's sitting in their house, enjoying themselves and thinking it's so easy why they don't go to shelters? Oh no, it's really quite complicated. It's they tell you to go to so many meetings and do this and this and this and get mental health, and that was one thing I thought that was quite interesting here.
Do you have mental health issues?
I could say I do, but I kind of fell in with everybody else and what they told me to do. But I noticed that even after my mental health appointments with more than one mental health professional, by the way, I have been not housed still, but that was one of the requirements for getting housing. And that was a rule of the shelter. You must be under mental health. And
Even if you don't have mental health issues, you have to be under a mental health rule?
yeah, that's what they tell. When I was talking to the lady, or the caseworker, I should say, at the Union Rescue Mission, she was saying, because at the time I didn't have mental health at all. I didn't know necessarily about mental health. But when I was there, she was saying, you are not doing your footwork. And
Wait a minute, you're not doing your footwork. You have cerebral palsy.
That's what I thought. So I had to go out and find mental health appointments. I had to go out and find housing. I had to go out and find all kind of stuff.
This is ridiculous. I can't. Go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this has been my experience. It's been crazy. And they tell you to save money as well. And that's what I was upset about. Okay, I've done your rules from A to Z, basically. I saved up so much money, and you still have no idea about any kind of housing program or anything that you could get me into that would actually get me housing for the money that I saved up.
So it seems like that program was based off of these not in my backyard people that I seen at Studio City that keep playing this game about all unhoused people are mentally ill. And yet you're doing all of what you're supposed to do and you still have no housing. They just don't want to see. It sounds like they don't want to see you, and they just want to justify their hatred by using these crazy rules. So have you lived on the streets?
I lived on the streets briefly. I was in a tent. Before going to another shelter, a motel was paid for. Me and my daughter paid for a couple of hotels in the process. And then I've been to 3 shelters. So it's been going kind of quite a journey.
Is your daughter unhoused too?
My daughter is unhoused as well with her 5-year-old son.
My God, is she living on the street as well?
Oh yeah, she is actually living in her car. She said, Mom, I'm not going through what you're going through the same way that you go through it. You're doing all the rules and it still doesn't help. So I'm not obeying the rule and still be unhoused.
That's the distinction I'm glad you pointed out. You can do all the rules that you can put up known to man, and they still are not housing you. So it's a farce, and it's ridiculous that you have to, unhoused people have to jump to so many ridiculous hoops because they are service resistant is the term that neighborhood prosecutors, Los Angeles Police Department officers, as well as the talented and well-heeled residents that pay into the system. I have, on that same note, have you had any encounters with police officers that did sweeps or anything to you?
Yeah, when I first got here, I didn't know too much about Los Angeles. So I was on the street one day and I was like, hey police, I'm lost. Can you at least give me a ride or give me some directions to how to get back home? I noticed he just kind of looked at me and he said, no, I can't help you. And also my daughter ran into a situation where they were just, I say they were hounding her because she was on the street, specifically in a tent, and dealing with her 5-year-old son. And they were trying to get more information about her kid more than trying to house her with her kid. So, I mean,
I have heard stories in a lot of interviews. A lot of people have been afraid to come on and interview because this is another corruptive measure from Los Angeles Police Department and prosecutors. They have been trying to run after mothers with kids that are unhoused and threaten them to take their children. That's another cruel tactic that they're saying, that they're unfit mothers and putting them in the system.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. And so she became scared, and we were trying to figure out a plan so her baby wouldn't have to be in the street, because we are actually dealing with being unhoused and all of everything that goes with it. And it's hard, because you don't want your 5-year-old son but to be homeless with you. But we've tried to take measures and found a babysitter and just did all kind of stuff. But still, she still wasn't housed after she came up with solutions for her baby.
This is a heartbreaking account that you did tell me. And it makes me angry when I go to these places and I see these police officers touting this drug-addicted mental health thing, and neighborhood prosecutors and other well-dressed, smooth-talking politicians that are blaming, but they are part of the problem. They are the criminals and criminalizing unhoused people. They say it's not a crime to be poor, but damn it, you have a lot of people that are have records and having to get their records expunged because you are criminalizing them. How is that helping unhoused people?
It's crazy. It's crazy. One of my major problems with being unhoused is that I'm on a SSI fixed income, and housing is too expensive here for even someone on SSI with a physical disability and a mental issue, if I might say. They want you to be mental and take the medication, which I think sometimes makes you worse. But even with my income, I have to figure out getting a job, going to school, which I don't mind. But it's a real stumbling block for housing, because I shouldn't have to do all of that. I'm already disabled. So it's just been hard.
Here's an example, prime example from a person that is physically disabled. You cannot deny she's not disabled, and you cannot deny that she has been not doing what she's supposed to do as the system as always dictates. But this is why I argue that the system needs to be overhauled, and our perceptions and allowing these people that hate unhoused people to be eradicated and changed and given less of a voice, because they are doing more harm with this narrative. And police officers and prosecutors are drinking it up because they are trying to appeal to their political base. And politicians are equally guilty. What is the best way for us to help you?
The best way, I think, is to have some landlords or somebody, if we could find some decent, people who would have a heart and would give people a second chance to help us. I would like to say we need to be helped on fixed income. Even GR is significantly less than SSI.
I also want to point out to you this too, that President Trump has just moved to cut benefits for people that are disabled, and they have to, no matter what disabled. Like, for example, my guest I had over a couple of episodes ago, he's dying of cancer. He has to get up and find a job at end-stage cancer where he can barely move. If he does not, his benefits are going to be taken.
Oh, that's just ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. But this is the world, this is a society we live in today. And I want to stand up and say, look, this is wrong. Somebody needs to change their heart, their mind, the spirit, and just become more understanding. Because if a person can't move, then they can't move. I do have some moving parts, and I can try to go find a part-time job, but it's going to be hard. It's ridiculous to try to push yourself to do something that's difficult.
But what of a person that's doing chemotherapy or is at the end stage of cancer and he can't move? I mean, what are you going to do? You cut him off of benefits, he's not going to be able to support himself. Secondly, what if you have someone that's a paraplegic and they have other health issues as well, and you keep saying this drug addiction, mental health, they're not doing what they're supposed to do, and they're out here on the street? It's a lie. And it's like, it's long past time for we to get out of this lie as a society and face the truth of the matter. This system is not working with capitalism. Capitalism is a game played for winners and losers. What happens if you lose? Everybody can't be rich. Everybody can't be middle class. We got people that are in different circumstances. And if we have this, I got mine, the hell with you, you get yours, then we all are going to suffer, because there is any time that there's injustice, there's going to be crime, and there's going to be a revolution of mind, a revolution of spirit, and a revolution of body. So if you want to talk about freedom and you don't want to do the work, so take the word freedom out of your vocabulary. This is Theo Henderson from We the Unhoused. I thank you all for listening, and I truly hope that we meet again in the light of understanding. This is Unhoused News. An LAX police officer has tested positive for the coronavirus. Officials are working to find out how many police officers have been in contact with this officer. In the United Kingdom, police are to get powers to detain people suspected of having coronavirus 19 under emergency law. In New Rochelle, New York, a suburb has the largest cluster of coronavirus 19. 108 cases are confirmed. Governor Andrew Cuomo is deploying the National Guard there. This is now a mitigation strategy. This strategy includes closing schools, community centers, and houses of worship within 1 mile radius of the center of the outbreak, which is believed to be started from a synagogue. Facts and myths. It is a myth that coronavirus was man-made, because coronavirus is a disease that permutated from an existing virus. Coronavirus can live up to 2 days on hard surfaces. The coronavirus is primarily spread through coughing or sneezing, or through droplets of saliva or discharge through your nose. You cannot protect yourself by swallowing or gargling with bleach, paint thinner, Dajal, steroids, salt water, ethanol, mouthwash, or other substances. It is also false that ordering or buying products from China will make a person sick. The coronavirus does not live very long on surfaces. It's a 2-day lifespan, so it is unlikely if a package that has been in transit for days or weeks will have the coronavirus. A face mask will not protect you from the coronavirus 19. The face mask allows tiny infected droplets to get in your nose, mouth, or eyes. People with respiratory issues can wear these masks to lessen their chances of infecting others. So if you have a respiratory issue other than coronavirus, that is when it's appropriate. But if you do not and you're putting on a face mask, that is only increasing your chance to get the coronavirus. Kalela is one of the highlighted women that we're recognizing on March Women's History Month. Her stories talks about her travails of being unhoused and dealing with families with trauma and how she overcame it. So here's Kalela's story. So continuing on with the interview, she was basically, before we were loudly interrupted with the Chinese Fair Parade festivities, we were talking about how she's seen the light in such those dark times, and she was explaining it a little bit to us. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that led to that. I guess place of hope and faith and trust. And I'm still working through it, like I mentioned, but it was a combination of supportive friends who really showed me what it is to still participate in life. Because at the time when I was in the facility, I would just be inside most of the day and be part of group work that really helped me in my rehabilitation process. But it was in the moments where they, for example, brought me to the park or get some ice cream that I was reminded that I can have my life again, in terms of integrating back and still enjoying. What does it mean to still feel joy? And on top of those experiences, I tried to surround myself with positive things. So I spent a lot of time at the LA Public Library. One of the blessings that's helped me on this path is just being surrounded by these books. I had to really recover my reading process because at the time it was really difficult to read a single sentence in a paragraph. So I tried my best to develop that ability again at the library on top of the group sessions, the group work. And the more I understood through my sessions with my trauma-informed counselors and therapists, I started to actually transform that understanding and judgment of myself and be more grateful for my ability to survive. So the more I got to see that, I started to embrace where I was and work with where I was at and just keep moving forward, because I knew everything in life is a process. The body has an ability to heal. And then what was happening to me was just my body's reaction to those traumatic experiences in my life where I didn't have the ability to cope and heal from. And so what was happening was a delay in that release, I would say. And but like I mentioned, I'm still in that process right now, still holding on to that hope, still holding on to that knowing that everything is to lead to a direction where hopefully my story does inspire you and other people around me, because life is all about growth, recovery, and healing, and community building.
Well said. I want to also point out as well, Maya Angelou had the similar experience, a traumatic experience happened to her, but she stopped speaking for over a year. And then there's a lot of people that are going out that has had trauma, and our society is very blaming and shaming type of environment that we don't embrace that. So this is Theo Henderson with the Unhoused, and I thank you all for listening, and may we again meet in the light of understanding. Theo Henderson here, Street Watch Chinatown. Today, November 14, 2019, I've invited with UCLA Law School to be a part of a panel to discuss unhoused issues and the criminalization that follows with it. Further on into this episode, we will interview a couple of the panel guests as well as some of the other members in the audience to get their perspectives and ideas in order for us to combat the growing hostility and vigilantism that follow by the council member, police, and citizens in the Los Angeles area. Good morning, this is Theo Henderson from Street Watch Chinatown. We are here at the UCLA campus. Today I have three people that are impacted in this social justice arena, for Joanna Swan, Lydia, and Jane Wynn. So I'm going to start off with asking a few questions about how did you guys get into with the social justice arena?
Well, I started off by holding a sign in the middle of the street because there was a protest against a homeless shelter in my neighborhood of Koreatown, and that's really where it started. And then we started talking to the unhoused neighbors of Koreatown and finding out that there's a lot of needs that aren't being met, and so we just started organizing and trying to meet those needs and advocate on behalf of our neighbors who are homeless.
I got involved, I guess there's so much parts, but I got involved with Street Watch because I heard it was happening I used to live on the west side, and it was just like pretty easy to show up, and I started going every week, and yeah, it's cool to get to know people, like neighbors, and it felt like it made like somewhat of a difference in terms of like cops being different when we were watching them, so yeah, that's how I got involved with this part of the movement.
I guess I started to get involved when I was living on the border of Skid Row in the Arts District, and one of our unhoused neighbors was getting really harassed pretty brutally by the Business Improvement District there. He had all of his belongings lit on fire by an off-duty security patrol in order to clear him from a stairwell where he had been residing for a long time. And then my community and I were impacted with an illegal eviction from our landlord, and kind of the gentrification there pushed us out of our abode. And I found myself getting involved with the tenants union through that, and then through the tenants union learned more about the Housing and Homelessness Committee and DSA and the Street Watch program that had been started through that. Just kind of a continuing journey.
What I've noticed from all of you guys is that one of the biggest things that I've noticed as being unhoused is the myth of how helpful the police and how nice the police and business and improvement district people really are. When you become on the other side of the fence, they don't really take you seriously, or they look at you as the problem, and people that have money or businesses have the power. What was your guys' experience? Were you guys of the myth that police could do no wrong, or that they were so great, they were officer friendly?
Yeah, well, my views on police involvement have shifted dramatically ever since I became involved, because I'm a petite little Asian girl and who has never been harassed by the police. And so I had always viewed them as helpful and friendly. But then when I came to the other side and I started advocating on behalf of our unhoused neighbors, it's a completely different relationship. It's really unfortunate, but I feel as though the police involvement can only be a negative thing, unfortunately, because of the trauma that people have experienced at the hands of the police. And so even if the cops are there with good intentions, I feel like it only escalates situations. So yeah, I have a much different perspective on police involvement now, and I feel like I believe that they are not at all necessary and they should be removed from homeless outreach altogether.
I mean, I feel like truly fuck 12 that like police are so dedicated to maintaining like white property interests from like their history as slave catchers to the present, and you really see that in the way that they police unhoused people. I feel like that, like kind of what Jane was saying, just like the trauma that they create and the kind of pleasure they take in enacting violence is really surprising. I think that people who like are housed and just kind of see unhoused people as like, oh, I feel unsafe or I don't want them in my neighborhood, are really grateful for police because they think, okay, they're just kind of moving this thing I don't want. But watching the police actually interact with people who like are living like for me on Venice Boardwalk or whatever, it's not just, it's like such a different level of cruelty and like very intentional, like not just trying to move people, but trying to like really scare them from ever coming back or like just kind of destroy them emotionally as well. Like people who like would be on the other side of a police caution tape from all of their belongings and nothing would have happened yet, but the police would just enforce that they couldn't take anything, or, you know, just really escalating situations. And I've seen like a lot of people who are just like really amazing, happy people living on the boardwalk just be like the most kind of like stereotype aggressive comes when the police are really threatening like everything that they have, and then it's like it just escalates so quickly. So yeah, the police are, I think, really a torment to all of LA, including unhoused people.
Yeah, definitely. It's tricky with like the bid patrols because a lot of the time these are like 18, 19-year-old kids being pitted against, you know, their fellow Latinx community or working class community, and it's heartbreaking to see like that systemic kind of violence, but also the mythology of like there's a few good cops or bad apples like is kind of the lie of that is drawn in such clear context when you're on the street and you see, like, it doesn't really matter if there's a nice cop or what, because at the end of the day, they're in the service of an incredibly unjust system that has historically oppressed the most marginalized of our communities. But it's doing street watch work has been pretty illuminating in terms of my own privileges and like where I can be and situate myself as a white woman. And I'm always happy to be able to use that privilege to the movement's benefit. But I've been to a fair amount of bid meetings. So those are like executive boards that are made up mostly of developers. And there's almost always a senior officer at these meetings. And it's very revealing of kind of the constant communication that the ruling class is in with law enforcement, and who's honestly always being served by law enforcement is those wealthy people.
I have a personal experience that have happened a few days ago, and I was talking to one of the directors of the Alpine Recreation Center, and I had the conversation from the standpoint that she said that, the police is just called. They are not really bad people. And then I looked at the situation where the lady that called the police and was actively trying to weaponize the police on me, and how that is a reality for us as unhoused people. Her major thing was she was on Twitter. She told me in so many words that I am not a community member, even though I lived in that area before I became unhoused. I am a homeless man that leaves his trash and harasses children at the park. And that really is the line that was designed deliberately to rankle everyone who hates unhoused people or have the view of unhoused people as a danger to the property values and people. So what is the most frustrating things that you've seen on the street when you're dealing with unhoused people, interactions with police or bid?
Frustrating. Well, I'm sure there's a lot. I can't really think of any particular instances right now. I think the overall apathy of the surrounding community is what frustrates me the most, because if they're not apathetic, then they're hostile. Yeah, and they would be installing planters and fencing and trying to chase unhoused people away from an unoccupied plot of grass, and it just it really doesn't make any sense for them to go out of their way to make people's lives even harder. So that's the most frustrating thing. I feel like we're in the midst of a humanitarian crisis and everyone should be concerned. But instead of being concerned and trying to help, they're going out of their way to hurt people. So that's something that makes me, so angry.
There's a lot of frustrating things for sure. I think, sort of like I was talking about before, I think it's really frustrating to watch all people's stuff be taken so quickly, and there's just been a lot of times where the person there's a sweep zone and the person is 2 steps away from exiting the sweep zone when the police come, and instead of having the ability, they have the ability to just say, oh, whatever, go, but they're oh, sorry, you're stuck, or someone who has one thing that can't fit in the stupid bag, and then oh, that thing is now lost, and it's just these stupid arbitrary rules that really I can't and it punishes people for doing such things like sleeping in an extra 10 minutes or going to get a cup of coffee, and it's to not have the ability to do those tiny things is such a dehumanizing process. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, it's frustrating to me, especially to see people feeling the need to prove their humanity constantly. That burden is constantly placed on unhoused and poor people to prove that they are worth taking up space in the society, where like we're at the point where mental health and drug use is so stigmatized for poor people that, you know, you have to say, well, I'm not a drug user. I don't have, you know, I'm healthy. Like, you constantly have to legitimize yourself. And what that leads to is people first of all, not feeling like they are fundamentally legitimate in this society, but also just that the people who do need that help are seen as subhuman. And it's just heartbreaking because sweeps, like having to move your stuff all the time or be protecting yourself from the city and from law enforcement or hostile homeowners, is incredibly taxing on your mental health already. And so just the amount of self-care that people are forced to do on their own with no support is just astounding to me as someone who struggles with my own mental health issues and is housed. It's very difficult for me to imagine dealing with that every day and being able to maintain as well as so many people I know do.
So what you guys do, what we have here at this table, and we have discussed on our way over, is one of the challenges of our privilege. I am unhoused, but I have my undergraduate in education, and I was an educator before I became unhoused. And I also have worked toward my master's. The thing with it is that I notice with me, my privilege is to be able to communicate with higher authorities and communicate in a way to de-escalate situations and to work things toward my favor. Conversely, where someone that has some trauma or has been traumatized so much, they have a breakdown or a barrier and they can't get through to the authorities like sanitation, police, and so their things can be easily swept away when they are agitated.
Yeah.
What things that you could do, what things for someone that really wants to help, what would your suggestion, and what privileges do you feel that you guys have, and how can you make it a positive instead of looking at it as a burden?
Well, while we were in the car over, I was expressing my guilt over all of my privileges because I'm housed. I have disposable income to be able to spend it on eating meals at restaurants, for example. And that's a luxury that a lot of people don't have. So instead of feeling guilty, Theo recommended that I be grateful for it and really look at my privilege in a way that can best improve society. And so that's what I'm working towards now, is to just use my privilege for the good of the community. And I would say, if you are someone who has all these privileges, be mindful of your privileges and speak out. You know, it's really important that you are vocal, either on social media or in person, because there's a lot of anti-homeless voices that are calling for dehumanizing and extremely harsh and punitive policies. So it's really important that if you're compassionate and you have the privilege, to please speak out.
Yeah, totally second everything Jane says. Okay. I would also just say, like, the smallest thing, like, people who are housed can do is, like, not call the cops. And, like, I mean, I feel like that people who are housed just have a lot of trouble seeing people who are not living, like, in an apartment as their neighbors. And, like, I just think about, like, if my neighbor is, like, whatever, like, leave something on their porch or is, like, having a party, like, I'm not going to call the cops on them, but we just see, like, people who are, like, on the street instead of under a roof is so much more disposable. And so just at least just kind of being like, if you feel inconvenience, just being like, oh, okay, like, this is my neighbor that kind of annoys me sometimes, instead of being like, this is a person that I can, like, remove at my convenience, is, like, I think a really important first step to, like, at least doing less harm with your privilege.
Yeah, I think another thing you mentioned on the ride over, Theo, was trauma-informed care, and I think that kind of coming at issues with an empathetic and compassionate bent to them and understanding the politicals situation that has informed a lot of trauma in the first place, like, can be healing for all parties involved. Like, for myself, I think it's been extremely, like, good learning and growing and healing my own issues by working to understand and speak with other folks that maybe aren't at that point yet. A lot of housed people are, stuck in a lot of bad loops, like thought, like whether it's discriminatory beliefs about race or class or gender, or misinformed ideas about addiction. I think like so much can be turned into learning opportunities when we are starting from that place of compassion and understanding the fundamental injustices that have been at work for centuries in this country.
Thank you, guys. We are on our way into the panel now. We will pick up at another time. Again, guys, thank you for listening, and may we again meet in the light of understanding. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job.
This episode could not have been done without the help and support of Down, that I'm so excited to say that some of you guys have contributed to my Patreon. And I give a very heartfelt thank you to all of you that have reached out and been impacted by my episodes, as well as financially contributed. I want to give particular thanks to my editor, Carl Nieto. I also want to thank Jed Perriott, an excellent organizer, in order for me to get into the unhoused encampments, in order for me to interview some people. I'd like to thank the residents of Chatsworth. I'd like to thank the residents of downtown LA, Echo Park, as well as Hollywood and other areas that I'm also not only in Los Angeles, but also around the world. I also wanted to thank as well as some very key people that have helped me while I have been unhoused. That is Michelle Liu from Zenmei Bistro, Zen and Mario, Craig Wong from CCD, as well as many of the neighborhood residents here in Chinatown. Again, we are our strongest by our weakest linked, and our weakest link is stronger when we band together. So when any of us have faced an insurmountable challenge, it is not always necessary to use or demonize a vulnerable population, but we can do better by embracing and helping one another instead of weaponizing police and city council apparatus. Thank you all, and may we again meet in the light of understanding. Episode 15 highlighted different extraordinary women and their travails and their successes and their challenges. We are also enduring a challenge with the coronavirus. So I ask our listeners to stay safe, do not fall into the fear of panic and discrimination and hatred for one another. And I thank you all for listening. May we again meet in the light of understanding.
If you like this episode, please contribute to our Patreon account.